Hey guys, this is Football Nation, your home of all things football. We're back with another episode of the halftime analyses. We've got John today representing Rangers. Thanks for the support last week with FM King and Aston Villa. John, welcome to the channel. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. Thanks very much for having me.
Yes, good to have you on. So, I'll start with how I start with all our guests. How is your season going so far? Ups, downs? Have a few minutes and let me know how your
Uh,
season's going so far.
our season's fairly mixed. I think to understand our season, you have to understand Scottish football, and particularly what they call in Scotland the Glasgow Goldfish Bowl. And on that basis, it's not going well. In terms of how you would look at English football, where I see it's expected from people that we're not too bad. But in terms of what you expect in Scotland, it's quite a disastrous season. We're 9 points behind Celtic at time of recording. We're in the final of the League Cup. That sponsor's just changed, and I forget the name of it. So I'm really, really sorry. We're recording this on the day of the League Cup semi-final as well, by the way. So absolutely criminal for me to forget the name of it. But generally, when you look at the Old Firm, how you're judged is based on who is top of the league, who is doing well in Europe. And realistically, Celtic have outperformed Rangers in both those. And on that basis, I would say it's a pretty bad season for Rangers because that's where Rangers and Celtic are judged. They're not judged on how they beat St Mirren or how they beat Ross County. They're judged on how they compete against an Ajax. They're judged on how they compete against a Manchester United. So on that basis, we're 9 points behind, and we're out of the Champions League, and we're not even in the Europa League. So it's a fairly bad season for us, in all honesty.
Sad to see that. Well, we're gonna do what we normally do. So what we do, I'm gonna get you to go through your transfers. I've written the transfers down, and
Yep.
I want to give you to give me a hit and miss. So do you want to go through the transfers that you've made this summer? Name them, and then give me a hit and a miss for the signings and
Yeah.
why.
So we'll hit with Malik Tillman first. Now, I think he's probably been one of our better signings for the summer window. Now, what I want to do is, and John, I hope you don't mind me doing this, is doing it based on hindsight,
Hmm.
but based on why the transfer was made. So Malik Tillman doesn't happen if we don't sell Joe Aribo to Southampton. Now, we got
Yeah.
decent money for Joe Aribo, concerning he's in his last season of his contract. Sorry. He is a young player from Bayern Munich. We have the
Yeah.
option to buy him for, I believe, if sources are to believe, about £2.5 million.
He's an FM
It's
gem.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel like that about him. He's a sort of guy that on Football Manager you'll sign, on FIFA you'll sign him. In real life, he's a bit hit and miss for me. Now, again, I'm going to go to the fact that we've had a bad season. We've changed manager mid-season. In the last 5 games, I've seen a bit more out of Malik Tillman. So, if you ask me this question in, 5-6 games time, is he a successful sign? Maybe that's a different answer. But right now, I feel he's had the big header, which got us to the Champions League, and I think that's a major thing. He got us through the Union game. Union are a team in
You,
Belgium.
yeah.
I can't mind their full name. He got a major header. We out jumped the goalkeeper to get us into the Champions League or keep us in the qualifiers, should we say, at that stage. He had a very good game against PSV. In general, I think, particularly when things started going bad for Giovanni van Bronckhorst, there was definitely telltale signs that he has maybe some mentality issues. That was very much shown in terms of his body language. If things start going bad, he was throwing his hands up. So I would say he's a guy that I think can be at success. I would personally be looking at triggering his loan to buy clause, but right now he's probably been in the myth category. Despite that, the next player I'm going to move to is John Souttar. Now, fans of Scottish football will know John Souttar. For me personally, he's played 45 minutes of games for Rangers, so it's very hard to judge him on a Rangers player. He has a history of injury problems, and
Mm.
that's hindered him being a successful Rangers player right now. Um, on that basis, you would say he's not been a success, but a fit John Souttar, and you can compare to your Connor Goldson, you can compare to Cameron Carter Vickers, the guys are the guys that are the leaders for Rangers and Celtic. John Suter is the best centre back or the best ball playing centre back in the Scottish Premier League. If we can have him fit, to get him for free on top of that is a great signing. But right now, you have not got him fit for more than 45 minutes, which was a start against Livingston at the start of the season. It's not looking a good transfer. But in general, I think this is a transfer that you still have time to work out. So next up is Antonio Colak. Now, the notes here have him at £2.5 million. Antonio Colak is the reason we didn't qualify for the Champions League last season. Antonio Colak played for Malmo, and then he moved to POAK, I believe it was. It was a Greek side anyway. And he scored the goal that knocked Rangers out of the qualifiers for the Champions League, knocked us out of the playoffs. It was the last stage before you got in the Champions League. And from there, our scouts have obviously gone and monitored him. They have then decided that he is good enough to sign. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst sealed that off. He was our manager at the start of the season, of course. And he has scored, I believe it's 14 goals in the league, which is joint top goal scorer in the league. You would look at that and say that's a success. For me personally, I look at that slightly differently. He is a very different striker to Alfredo Morelos, who I'm used to, who Rangers fans are used to. Alfredo Morelos isn't a goal scorer. Antonio Colak is. He's the kind of guy that you get the ball in the box, you give him service, he will score goals. Alfredo Morelos is more the guy that allows you to create the goals. And when you're playing a one-striker formation, it's two different things. I think Rangers look better, in my opinion, with Alfredo Morelos, even though he's not in his best form. But you're going to score more goals with Antonio Colak. So that's the balance. It's very difficult to judge that on how successful a signing he's been on that basis, because of obviously it's difficult. I'm going to quickly move on to Rabbi Matondo because I don't really know how to cover Antonio Colak. It is so mixed, and I want to be fair to the lad and say, he's done well, but is he the signing for Rangers is very, very questionable. Rabbi Matondo last season is very, very interesting. He was Player of the Year in the Belgian top flight. When we signed him, him for £3 million. So when you talk about Player of the Year in the Belgian top flight, I think a lot of people look down on leagues like Belgium, and including Scotland as well, by the way, I include that. But even Scots look down on the Belgian league. It is a very, very good league. Very, very competitive players, very good players at all levels of that top flight. It would be a disservice to say that this is a step up for him. This is almost a sidestep, but it's a sidestep that maybe opens doors for Rabbi Matondo. On top of that, Rabbi Matondo is the fastest accelerating player in world football. And the stats that back that up is when players do training drills, this is all recorded. When he was at Manchester City, he done a training drill. And it was based on how fast you got from 0 to 100 metres or whatever it was. I think it was 0 to maybe a 20 metres because it was based on acceleration. So from 0 to 20 metres, his time was 0.2 seconds faster than Usain Bolt's world record for the 100 metres time. This guy is rapid, but for whatever reason, he has not worked at Rangers. It has not been a success. Now, you have to look at that and say that Rangers domestically are going to face a low block a lot of the time. That timing behind to play against the pace that Rabbi Matondo offers. So that obviously affects how you judge Rabbi Matondo, but the assists aren't there. Final ball isn't there. Right now, I would say this signing is not a success on either party. And that kind of brings us to a Radovan Yilmaz, who came from Besiktas for £4 million if you believe some sources. Other sources have it about 2.5 million. He is currently linked with Galatasaray, which probably suggests his reputation in football, but also how this has worked for Rangers. Left back is where Radovan Yilmaz plays, and that is a key factor. Rangers have a very settled left back in Borna Baric, who's an aging left back. He's coming in his 30s now. He's 30, 31, I believe. But he's known for his final third play. He's not necessarily the best defensive fullback, But that's not how Rangers play. They play with very attacking fullbacks. You've got Tavernier on one side who creates insane numbers that matches with anyone in world football. Barnabas' assists are not far behind in terms of what Tavernier's is. You've got Gerrard quoted and both Van Bronckhorst quoted as saying, I can't believe I've got my left back crossing at my right back to score a goal. In terms of how they play football and how they want to play football, that's not necessarily how they want to set up, but they've got these two guys who create chances. Yilmaz's final ball is not the same as what Barnabas did, but he's 21 years old. He's not expected to have that same final ball. He's still a developing player. It's difficult to judge him just now. It's 6 months in. He's had an injury just as he was breaking into the team, and when Barnabas was dealing with international duty and fitness issues. And at that exact time was when he got injured. And for that, he's never had a chance to break into the team. I don't want to criticise Ridvan Yilmaz because I believe, and from what I have seen, there's a very, very exceptional player there and a young man who has unbelievable potential. You know, I don't want to say that Rangers is his limit. I don't want to say that Galatasaray is his limit. I genuinely believe he continues on the progression path that he has. Manchester City, Liverpool, PSGs could be the kind of teams that we're looking at him. Right now, he can't get to the Rangers team. That is not a criticism because of what's in front of him and what is, and the kind of, I'm saying what the injuries are that have held him back. Apologies for my start there. The last sort of signing is Ben Davies, and this, again, this signing doesn't happen if we don't sell Calvin Bassey.
Yeah.
This was a signing that was based purely on the fact that we sold Calvin Bassey. It cost about £4 million.
Yep. He had a really good reputation before he went to Liverpool.
He really did. And he was a player that Celtic tried to sign. Liverpool signed him instead. He chose Liverpool instead. So, you're talking about players that your direct rivals are signing. The last 5 games, I say the last 5 games, at time of recording, Rangers hadn't conceded a goal with the pairing of Connor Goldson and Ben Davies as centre-back pairing. Now, today, they have conceded a goal to Aberdeen where Ben Davies, I think, had a very, very poor game. He's had injury problems. I think the judgment is still out. And I've said this about a few players, where the judgment's probably still out. Ben Davies is very much is that mould, but there's certainly a very good potential for a Connor Goldson Ben Davies partnership.
Yeah. One I did see you miss was Tom Lawrence on the free transfer. From Derby County.
I'm truly sorry about him. I forgot.
He was like, obviously Derby didn't have a great season last season and they had their issues, but he was one of their main, probably their best player last season in a struggling Derby team.
Yeah,
so it was good pickup for you.
I've heard very good things.
Ex-United youth prospect as well.
Yeah, I've heard very good things from Derby fans in regards to Tom Lawrence. He started the season very, very good, and he looked like he was going to sort of cement that number 10 role, if you like, that sort of Malik Tillman has currently said. Yanis Hadji will be fighting for when he returns from injury. He's obviously been out for a year. But Tom Lawrence was that sort of guy that we necessarily want to say, I'm trying to word this right, missed. He's the guy that could score the goal from outside the box. We've got John Lundstrom who can do it, but he's not very consistent in it. I know outside the box goals are in high percentage chances, but there's players that are going to hit the target and make the goalkeeper work more often than not. And you can see very early on that Tom Lawrence was the guy that was going to make the goalkeeper work. There was a cleverness about how he shot. There was a cleverness about who he passed. I don't think he's necessarily an elite football player. He's 28. He's been playing in the Championship. He's not going to be that level. He's not the guy that we're going to deliver take on and develop into a player who we're going to sell on to Manchester United. The way that we could have done with Calvin Bassey as an example, or with a Joe Aribo who's going to Southampton. He's not that guy that's going to go into the Premier League next. This is probably the pinnacle of his career. But the injuries that he had has sort of knocked him back. I don't exactly know what injuries he's had, but I know he got one just before the first Celtic game, and it has been an absolute disaster for us because it upset the balance for us. He was also a very key part of Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's plans for the Rangers team,
Hmm.
how he played that 10 role and how he forced defences to come out to mark him, which would free up space for Antonio Cholak.
Hmm.
That's not something we're now seeing under Mick Beale. Obviously, Tom Lawrence isn't available for selection, neither is Antonio Cholak, so maybe we see different tactical styles from Mick Beale under that. But right now, neither of them have been fit since he has taken on the job, so it's very difficult to judge how he views these two players. But if we have someone who can score from outside the box as well as being a creative player, I don't think it's a bad thing. So I would say the start of his Rangers career was a success. The injuries have made him right now in the judgment section, and that has made him quite forgettable as this is going because I completely forgot about that we'd signed him, but he did start the season very very brightly.
We'll move on now, and as normal, we have picked some games that we're going to give you a few minutes on each game. First game, Hibernian 2, Rangers 2. So, what's your thoughts on that game, Don?
That game is a game that sticks in my mind as a game that, and I kind of want to go before this game before I really go into this game because this game was a game that really highlighted the issues we had under Giovanni Van Bronckhorst. Now, I love Van Bronckhorst. He was a great player for Rangers. His playing career was exceptional. He got us to the Europa League final last season. His domestic form wasn't great last season, and that's something that you have to take into consideration coming into this season. The Europa League final probably kept him in a job. But his CV is good. He won a league with Feyenoord, the first league in 20 years, 15, 20 years, I believe it was. I don't have the exact stat on that. There will be some person who knows the Eredivisie better than me that'll be able to answer that. But, it was an exceptional sort of run with Feyenoord, difficult time with in China, and then he came to Rangers, got us to Europa League final, and that's glossed over everything. So
Hmm.
this season really was a time for him to prove himself domestically. And this Hibs game is a very, very strong example of where Giovanni Van Bronckhorst was getting it wrong. What you've got with Rangers is two very attacking fullbacks. You've got Borna Barisic, who has one of the best deliveries in world football. I don't care what anyone says. For a left back, there's very few players that have a better final ball than Borna Barisic. Got James Tavernier, granted, takes penalties, takes free kicks, has outstanding numbers going forward. And Giovanni Van Bronckhorst wanted to play a bit more defensive. He still allowed Tavernier to go forward. There was a bit more restriction on Barisic. This game was a game that really highlighted that. We won this game. We drew this game 2-2. James Tavernier scored a penalty. Tom Lawrence scored in the 58th minute after Martin Boyle scored. Now, Martin Boyle's been a sort of thorn in Rangers sides for years. Player I highly rate. He's a very, very quick player, a good finisher. So while he is not the all-and-out perfect footballer, he's quick and he can finish. Against a team like Rangers, where you can play on the counter, Martin Boyle is one of the perfect examples of a player that can hurt you. So he scored, and then Tom Lawrence had made it 2-2. We then got a red card in the 66th minute. It was John Lundstrom. He made what I would class as a professional foul, where the player knows he's not getting the ball. He's not aiming to hurt the player. There's no endangerment. There's nothing like that. And John Lundstrom got a red card for this. This red card was later overturned on appeal.
Hmm.
At that point, Giovanni Van Bronckhorst has made the decision to bring on Alfredo Morelos for Alfredo Morelos has been out for a number of months. In fact, I believe the last game he played before this was Red Star Belgrade in the away leg of the Europa League quarter final. So that goes how far back Alfredo Morelos has not played. And Alfredo Morelos is known as a bit of a hothead. He's known as a guy that doesn't like playing when things are against you. He's not the guy that you bring on when you've got 10 men on the pitch.
Yeah.
He is not that player. Antonio Cholak should have seen that game out. I prefer Morelos personally in the Rangers system.
Yeah.
And Antonio Cholak was the man for that situation.
I've always rated
Brought
Morelos.
on, yeah, Morelos is brilliant. He really is. This season has not been as great, but he's returning to fitness. There's other issues going on with him, and I think there's confidence issues as well. But this wasn't the game to reintroduce him. You're going up, you're down to 10 men. The red card has been extremely controversial, and as I said, later overturned by the SPFL. So that admits that it shouldn't have been a red card. And what's happened is he's gone up for a challenge. Hibs and Aberdeen are two games that drives Morelos. He's a player that plays on the edge. And because of that, he makes rash decisions. In this instance, he threw the elbow into someone. We're now playing with 9 men against Hibs. And it's important to remember, as much as Hibs don't look great in terms of their league table position, Hibs are an extraordinarily good side. They're a side that, for the Scottish Premier League, is a top half side. They're probably our equivalent of what Spurs are in England, if you like.
Yeah.
They're a team that should have won things that they haven't won. They're a team that there or thereabouts, regardless of what squad they build, what manager they have, they're always sort of a team that's there or thereabouts. There's odd seasons where they drop down below, and in recent years they've been relegated, re-promoted, and whatnot. So we're playing 9 men against this team that's a very, very good side. And what Giovanni Van Bronckhorst done is he's essentially gone with the 9-0-0, is what I called it. There was no out ball, and because you could see that every time a centre back is clearing the ball, it's coming back. And and I don't care what football team you support, there's games where you watch where the other team's just going to score. The Hibs eventually scored in the 92nd minute. It was an absolute great strike from, I'm just checking who scored this, Josh Campbell. It was a great strike from the edge of the area. It was about 25 yards out into the top corner against a top quality goalkeeper in Alan McGregor. But regardless of whether that goal was 25 yards out or a 2-yard tap in, you could feel that coming. The pressure was building. Hibs were going for it. They sniffed the blood, and they've came out to earn the point. And that point could be a big point, or a big 2 points that we've dropped in terms of our season now. You could blame the John Lundstrom red card, which was a big factor in terms of how Morelos comes on, how his mentality is, and how in terms of Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's tactics once both of them sent off. But for me, if you just had one guy up top that you can clear the ball to, and he runs on, and I don't care if that's Rabbi Matondo would have probably been the perfect example of. We've got very quick players in Rabbi Matondo, Ryan Kent, Fashion Sakala, who could have, you just launch the ball. It doesn't need to be accurate. Just launch the ball over their defence. And these guys are capable of winning that race against the Hibs centre backs or the Hibs full backs who are now pushing forward, who, win the ball, hold the ball at field, and maybe allow us to have a break. Whereas instead, we're hitting the ball to Hibs centre backs who were unchallenged because there was nobody there to do that job. And I think that's one of the games that really highlights where Giovanni Van Bronckhorst got his tactics wrong and resulted in his sacking.
Yeah, definitely. That was a big game involved in that sacking. And next we had a very disappointing game, the Old Firm derby, and that was Celtic 4, Rangers 0. So the derby, Celtic having a good season. What's your thoughts on that?
I think
Celtic.
I want to start this by saying that Ange Postecoglou's done a brilliant job at Celtic. I don't want to take anything away from that. My criticisms are going to be how Giovanni Van Bronckhorst set up against an Ange Postecoglou system. If we go back 12 months before this game, Rangers went into an Old Firm game with 6 players at minimum, I'm remembering 6, that were ineligible because of COVID restrictions, because they were out with COVID, and we won 2-1 that game. Was it 2-1?
Wow.
But essentially, we won this game. But essentially, we won the game. The first game of last season, we had won. We had Robbie McCrory in goal, who was our third choice goalkeeper. We had Liam Balogun at right back, who was our third choice right back. There was other changes that we were missing. We were missing 6 or 7 first team players, and we won that game against an Ange Postecoglou Celtic that played the exact same style with almost the exact same players that Giovanni Van Bronckhorst has struggled against. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's first game against Celtic, he got absolutely battered. And that is not sugarcoating any stretch of the way. Celtic outplayed us that day. I think it was 5-0 at the start of the year. They then beat us 2-1 at Ibrox. Bear in mind, before Giovanni Van Bronckhorst came in, we hadn't lost to Celtic in 2 years.
Yeah.
So this is a big factor in terms of talking about leagues, which is why I'm going into the sort of precursor for this game. We then beat them in the Scottish Cup final after extra time, where our fitness just showed. And this was when we were playing Europa League. They weren't. I think I'm pretty sure we played an extra time on the Thursday. They'd had a week off. And then we've played extra time on the Sunday, and we've won both games.
Wow.
It just shows the fitness levels that we'd had last season. Against Celtic this season, now we lost the last game of last season as well, irrelevant to what we're talking about, but just to highlight Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's record against Celtic, it wasn't good. And coming into this season, where you were looking at games, the Hibs game is a good example. There's a Livingston game at the start of the season, I believe we won 2-1. But performances weren't there. People say that teams that grind out results are good teams. We were grinding out results, but the performances weren't there. And as soon as we played a good team, we were always going to drop points. And the Champions League had showed that. We'd played well against PSV. We'd played well again in the second leg against Union. The first leg was kind of very similar to the domestic form. The Celtic game was an absolute shocker. It was 4-0, but it was 4-0 where Rangers didn't really create anything, and Celtic could have had the scoreline to really whatever they wanted on that given day. Losing to Celtic for Rangers fans, and I really want to make this clear to people who view this, is unacceptable. It's the same for Celtic fans losing to Rangers. It's unacceptable. And I get that. That's the same with most derbies. Whether it's Man United, Liverpool, Man United, Man City, Arsenal, Spurs, who's, again, time of recording has been today. Most fans don't like losing to their rivals. In terms of Scottish football, that decides league titles. That decides how cup finals. That decides who wins the League Cup, the Scottish Cup. How you beat Ross County. If you drop points to Ross County, you need the other team to lose points to Ross County or Motherwell or whoever. The reality is, it comes down to the Old Firm games.
Yeah.
When you turn up to an Old Firm game against an Ange Postecoglou Celtic, who are very, very fast-paced or very, very high tempo, the ball goes out of play. The ball's back in within seconds. The ball boys are trained to it. And I don't want to understate that. Literally, the manager has got the ball boy to throw the boy to the player who's got. It doesn't matter who's selected to take throw-ins, who's selected to take free kicks. That ball boy has told him to get that ball to him within seconds. And it's back in the play before the opposition's even set. It's a very, very clever tactical style that Ange Postecoglou has set. And I don't think I want to take away from that because, it's very, very clever and it's very, very well worked from Celtic. It's something they've done in Europe. It's something they've done in domestically, regardless of the competition, against any team. The fact that you can set up your team to play defensive against that, and what I mean by defensive is almost Rangers played a low block against Celtic in that game, from my opinion. Wasn't your typical low block, where you have 10 men behind the ball. But Rangers set up that game to get a point. If you watch that game was all about staying in the game for as long as you can. And maybe we look at our fitness for the end of the game because our fitness historically has shown better than Celtic's. Maybe we look at the fitness in the 70th, the 80th minutes to nick a winner. But the reality is, Celtic blow teams away in the first 20 minutes. And that's exactly what they've done to us because we're not set to press them. And when you're looking at, we've got guys who are designed to press. We've got attacking fullbacks. We're not designed for a team that sits back. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst got this tactically very, very wrong. And it shows on the day. Celtic were a class above. And it pains me to say that, but they really did. They were miles above us.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it's a hard one to take. I know about the losing to your rivals. It felt good beating City yesterday. So, yes, next we had St Johnstone 2, Rangers 1. Did you want to go over that one for us quickly?
Yeah, that was one of the typical games under Giovanni Van Bronckhorst where Rangers look okay. They look like they're going to create stuff. In reality, they don't create a whole lot. The other team scores, the other team then has a low block. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst never really knew how to break that down. And if we go back, and now we've got Michael Beale in charge, who was Gerrard's number 3, if you like, who took 3 years to learn how to beat these low blocks. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst never had 3 years on how to beat these low blocks.
Mm.
Giovanni Van Bronckhorst never really learned how to beat these low blocks, and that was a big factor. So we'd started really, really well. I've just refreshed my game on this. Refreshed myself on this game just before we started, as you know, Johnno, because I wanted to make sure that I had it in memory. And it was one of those games where we created a lot of chances in the first sort of 10, 15 minutes. So Johnston then scored. And then from there, it only ever looked like one winner because we never looked like scoring. They had 11 shots, 3 on target. We had 29 shots, 7 on target.
Yeah, 73% possession as well to Rangers.
Yeah, 73% possession. And this wasn't an uncharacteristic statistic. You go for any game that we lost under Giovanni Van Bronckhorst, we dominated possession, but weren't winning these kind of games. You know, I think I'm looking at this. Nicky Clark scored, an ex-Ranger striker, by the way. Didn't do. He's not a great striker. James Brown scored for them. I'm not saying who scored for Rangers in this game, but I believe it was 2-0 before he even scored. Yeah, no, it's just one of them. You look at it. So it was James Brown, then Nicky Clark that scored, and then James Tavernier got one back for us. I just wanted to refresh my memory on that. And James Tavernier's goal was outside the box. You know, it wasn't like a clear-cut chance that we created, and Tavernier's popped up at the back post. You know, the same way that I've said last year. Barisic crossing it and Tavernier popping it in the back post. And I don't care. Go and watch Borussia Dortmund games. Go and watch the Red Star games. Go watch Leipzig games. The amount of times that happened. This was one, but it was like a scrappy corner. It came in, he's headed out, and Tavernier's managed to hit the target. This was the kind of thing that we were seeing at the end of Van Bronckhorst reign. Johnny, you obviously talked to me quite a bit. You know I wasn't happy with Giovanni Van Bronckhorst from the start of the season.
No.
And this was a manager that got us to a European final. And I said about 3 or 4 games in, that is not the right manager for us. I was going to say he doesn't know what to do. I think he has a very good clue what he's doing. It's not designed for a team that is brave for every single game. And this was a big, big game that showed that, you know, set pieces hurt us. The amount of goals we conceded from corners this season, and even at the end of last season, is unbelievable. And the fact that when you're going into press conferences and the manager's being asked, are you going to change how your defensive corners are being? And he's going, no, we're going to stick to our style. But you've conceded 45 goals. I'm exaggerating here, by the way. I'm not exaggerating by much. Conceded almost every single game a goal from a corner. There's a point where you have to admit this is a problem. Yeah. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst wasn't equipped to do that. This game against St Johnstone was a big, big example of why we've dropped 3 points. We may still drop 2 points if we fix that. But I think we've picked up 3 points on this day if we can defend corners and, you know, just break down the low block a bit better. It was just purely for me down to Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's tactical style. And again, as I said earlier, I want to say I love the guy, but he showed tactical naivety in terms of how he deals with teams that set up in Scotland and how they deal with this. Play for a set piece, play for, you know, and, you know, big clubs in other countries will experience it. There's no question about that. It's very frustrating when you play as a top club and you're playing against low blocks every single week. Or you're playing against, and England doesn't have this to this extent because, you know, you guys have a very competitive league. But, you know, Ajax have it. I know that for a fact. Rangers have it. Celtic have it. I would bet my bottom dollar that Barcelona, Real Madrid, Benfica, Porto, Ludogorets, and, you know, Bulgaria, I would bet my bottom dollar that these teams play these kind of systems.
Yeah.
You have to be capable of breaking them down if you want to manage a team that wants to play at this level. And for me, this was a very, very strong game that highlights that Giovanni Van Bronckhorst just didn't have it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And the last two games we're going to talk about, did you want to go over Aberdeen versus to Rangers 3 and Rangers 2, Celtic 2?
So I will start with the Aberdeen. Now, for people who don't know Scottish football, Aberdeen Rangers is our equivalent to Man United Liverpool. It's two teams. It's Rangers' second biggest derby of the season. In fact, I would class it as a Rangers fan as our only derby of the season that isn't out with Celtic. I know Hibs and Dundee United and a couple of other teams class us as derbies or rivalries, if you like. I don't class them. And I don't think a lot of Rangers fans do. I think maybe Dundee United because of the last 10 years, but I think that's something that will dissolve over time from the Rangers' end. Rangers and Aberdeen absolutely hate each other. Nobody knows why it started, but they absolutely hate each other. I believe a big part of it was down to Alex Ferguson. Some people tell me it was further back than that. Some people say it was that era, the 80s, Alex Ferguson, Aberdeen era. I don't really know. So to get a 3-2 victory over your rivals is always a bit sweeter. To do it when you're 2-1 down in the 94th minute is even better. So basically this game, and I remember this game quite well, we had started really, really well, and I was in the pub for this game. So I'm going to sort of talk to you what my thing was at this. Because this probably tells your mentality. We went 1-0 up, if I remember correctly. I'm just going to Google it just to make sure that I'm refreshing my memory. But my memory is we went 1-0 up and we were kind of cruising. And then they scored. And then they scored again. But we never looked like scoring at that point. We never, ever looked like scoring at that point. And it just was one of them where I think I remember going back to the pool table and I'm playing pool and Scotty Arfield scores in the 95th minute. And you celebrate, which is like, yes, this is a point. They've probably been better than us. This was not long after Michael Beale had taken charge as well. So, new tactical style. I say new tactical style. Michael Beale was part of Gerrard's backroom staff. So, you're only going back a year. And he was classed as the brains behind the operation, if you like, for Gerrard, which is why he's had opportunities at QPR, now Rangers. He was so highly regarded at both Rangers and Villa beforehand, and Liverpool to an extent, although he was in the youth system. It's very, very difficult to see how he can transform a team that was so bereft of confidence and so far behind so quickly. But we're 2-1 but down, and Scotty Arfield scores the scrappiest goal you would ever see in your life in the 95th minute. And at that point, you're like, yes, we've got a point. You're delighted. And then I think the last goal, it comes in, cross, it comes in, Connor Golson hits it, bounces off their defender, and it hits the balls to Scotty Arfield again, who misslices this shot at the top corner. And he's never meant to hit it at the top corner. He's never meant to hit it like that. I don't care what you say. But what I will say is, results like that always feel so much better when it's against a team that is your rival. You don't care how it goes in. In fact, you're 2-1 down at Johnno, you're a United fan. Could you imagine beating Liverpool when you're 2-1 down in the 94th minute? You know what I mean? That's the kind of elation this was for Rangers fans. This was the moment that I think most Rangers fans who supported Michael Beale getting on side, but I think even the ones that didn't support Michael Beale were now on side because they're like, done that to Aberdeen. Teams don't go up to Aberdeen, and particularly Rangers teams, because Aberdeen in Scotland are known for raising their game against Rangers. Jim Goodwin's quoted as this season as saying, there's no point in attacking Celtic. They're just going to beat us anyway, so we'll sit with a low block. We'll play for a point. Aberdeen will attack Rangers. Today's a good example in the League Cup final. This 3-2 was a good example where they will attack Rangers. There's that extra level because it's a rival from. They hate Rangers, don't hate Celtic. They don't hate Hibs, they don't hate Hearts. If they play to this level every week, Aberdeen would genuinely challenge you for them. They don't play at this level every week. But this was the week that I think most Rangers fans, whether you were for Beale or against Beale, went, right, Michael Beale's our guy because he's made the changes that have got us that result. Granted, it wasn't a great performance, but we've came out of it with 3 points. In terms of the Celtic game, and I'm going to kind of break this down. I'm going to go into a lot of the history. I've covered a bit of this before with Giovanni van Bronckhorst. Before Giovanni van Bronckhorst came, his first Old Firm game, Rangers hadn't lost in 2 years. This was a Michael Beale coaching staff team with Stephen Gerrard, Gary McAllister, and a few others. I believe Tom Colshaw, who's a set piece coach, is very, very good, very, very highly regarded. Was at Villa as well. So we came into this game having lost, I think, 3 out of the last 4. We had drawn 1, and we'd got 1 win after extra time. So between Michael Beale leaving and coming back, as a coach to manager, we had won 1 Old Firm game and extra time to do that. The mentality coming into this game wasn't necessarily correct. I think if you were to go and watch the 90 minutes of that game, you watch the highlights, you watch whatever segment you want, we were very, very unlucky to draw that game. But, Celtic are a good side. They press well. Very, very difficult. So the goal scorers were, on the day, Ryan Kent and James Tavernier. Ryan Kent's not a goal scorer. Tavernier was a penalty. It was a Stonewall penalty. There was a penalty claim for Connor Goldson. He's went like this. Now, Celtic fans are complaining about VAR and the fact they did not give a penalty. The rule by the handball law. Now, Celtic have appealed to the SPFL, and the SPFL have now appealed to whatever governing body makes the laws. It's not FIFA, it's somebody else, to change the handball law. But the laws are, if you're within yourself, so in this instance, Connor Goldson's protecting his face. It's a very hard shot at very close range. You're talking concussions if it hits him in the face. He's protected his face. They're complaining that this is not a penalty. I want to highlight particularly the Kyogo goal. In fact, I'll highlight both the goals that Celtic scored. I'm not going to highlight the Rangers goals because one's a penalty, it's a Stonewall penalty. Sebastian Saka's done really well. He's a paid defender, is what it is. Ryan Kent, he's done it's great work from Sebastian Sakala again. He's passed it, Ryan Kent, he scored. I don't think there's a whole lot to talk about in those 2 goals, but defensively, the 2 Celtic goals, from a Rangers point of view, there's something to talk about. The first goal was Alfredo Morelos. He's played it to James Tavernier. He's intercepted a Celtic pass. He's played a first-time pass towards James Tavernier. And Maeda, who is a very, very good pressing sort of front-line man, but all across the front line, I don't think he's necessarily the best player or football player. I don't think he'd play at a much higher level, but in the SPL, he is a very, very good pressing player. At a higher level, be a very good pressing player as well. I think if you were looking at a Bielsa lead system, a Klopp Liverpool system, he would fit very well into them. Maybe can't do it to that level, but that's the kind of system that Maeda is very good in. He's intercepted the ball, and then Tavernier's put in half a. Do you understand what I'm saying when I talk about a half a challenge, where the player sticks a foot in, but he's not really in the challenge? And Maeda's then gone through, scored. Really good finish, to be fair. The second one, there's 4 or 5 attempts to clear, and it's one of them where a crosses came in, first header out doesn't go out, second clearance doesn't go out, third clearance doesn't go out. And you have to look at your defence at that point and say, why is that ball not leaving the box? This was a game where 3 points very much was achievable, closing the gap to 6 points very much was achievable. This was a 6-pointer where we got points. And again, I don't want to take anything away from Ange Postecoglou. I don't want to take anything away from Celtic. They have been very, very good this season. They deserve to be top of the league. Ange Postecoglou's got them guys firing. He's signed guys that he knows works in his system. And he's signed guys that, work to how he wants people to play. They're not necessarily the best footballers in the world. I think we have better players across the park in most places. But the players that he wants suits his style and it gets results. And that is the difference right now. And this is a game that we dropped 3 points. And in reality, 1 point down the record against Celtic for the past year was good. But on the day, it was 3 points. It was 2 points dropped.
So, thanks for coming on, Don. Where can we find you?
So you can find me on the Don Gaming FM on Twitch or the Don Gaming on YouTube. That's a bit sporadic at the minute, but we'll be coming back soon. But they're kind of the 2 places to find me, mate.
Yeah, and you can find me wherever you normally find me, Johnno TV everywhere, at Road to Legends, with Don, and at the Football Nation podcast. Make sure you smash that like button, smash the subscribe button, turn it bounce so you never miss an upload. This has been your Football Nation, your home of all things football.